weaponizing a monetary unit so as to commit atrocities around the globe militarily being done in our name. That stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. That is how monetary systems die. That is the history of money. But this is death by a thousand cuts, and we're seeing it internationally and domestically.
We're trying to get ourselves out of debt by replacing it with more debt. That's like trying to pay off a credit card with another credit card.
The government has a monopoly on money, and they haven't really let anyone touch it for a really long time. And that's not by accident, of course. The United States government wants you using the fiat dollar. They don't want you using alternative currencies. And so they've saddled everything else with taxes and with all of these other regulations so as to make them unworkable as money, because you don't have to worry about politicians politicizing decisions, trusting them to act in your best interest.
I mean, I feel like you're fighting a giant, right? You're going against the system.
We're not just talking about Leviathan in general. We're talking about Leviathan's greatest weapon, their greatest power. The government's monopoly on money gives them such awesome and incredible power, foreign and domestically.
Especially with politicians or anyone in government, if the general consensus starts becoming, hey, this is a good thing, I feel like more people would be on board openly.
Second to language, money is our single biggest communicative tool that humans use to interact peacefully.
As soon as President Nixon abolished the gold standard in 1971, our money was left to die, and the dollar is currently taking its last breath. But I met someone who is tirelessly traveling all 50 states with his main mission to make gold and silver money once again. This interview is with Jp Cortez, the executive director of Sound Money Defense League, one of the very few people willing to and actually facing the system, restoring God's money to its rightful owners in a civilization that is quickly collapsing. So without further ado, make sure you subscribe and enjoy the video. Welcome back, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have a special treat. I'll be interviewing Jp Cortez, which is the executive director of Sound Money Defense League. This is going to be something that's a little different than my normal interview. I'm really excited about this. I'm sure a lot of you will get a lot out of this. First off, JP, it's nice to have you on my channel. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Slayer. Thanks for having me on, man. I'm loving the channel.
It's something that everyone is interested in, but nobody knows much about. So first off, what exactly do you do? And can you break it down in a way that everyone can understand it?
Absolutely. So the Sound Money Defense League is a nonpartisan gold and silver advocacy group. We go state to state remonetizing precious metals for use as money. As we see it, the primary reason why gold and silver are not usable as money today has nothing to do with, legal tender status or a national gold standard or anything like that. The reason is primarily the taxes. There are too much friction involved in these transactions to make them workable as money. In 5 states here in the United States, you're going to get charged a sales tax when you buy precious metals, gold or silver, or coins, bars, and rounds. In the majority of states, and then again on the federal level, you're going to get hit with a capital gains tax when you use or sell the metals. So there are too many disincentives. There's too much friction there in the form of taxes for actual use as money. So by removing these disincentives to people using this stuff transactionally, I think we'll see more people adopt their own gold standard. We'll see people adopt sound money, and hopefully that eventually becomes something that can be implemented nationwide.
Wow, you're doing heroes work. How realistic is this? Is there 4 or 5 states that's actually passed this?
Yeah. So honestly, I am so bullish on this. This is the Sound Money Defense League has been around for 10 years. We've been doing this now. This is our 10th year anniversary. And it's also our most legislatively successful year in our history. This year, there were 8 successful legislative projects that we worked on across the country. These are bills that eliminated sales tax on purchases of precious metals. In the case of Wisconsin and New Jersey, you may have heard these states recently repealed sales tax on the metals. In the case of Nebraska and Alabama, we worked to remove capital gains taxes. So when you sell the metals, the state isn't going to charge you a capital gains tax. We also worked in states to reaffirm gold and silver as legal tender. And in Utah's case, this is a state that's already done a lot of these preliminary things. So now they're moving on to bigger steps involving sound money. They're moving on to empowering their state treasurer to invest $180 million worth of physical gold to hold on the state's balance sheet. So we're talking about, individuals, you and I are trying to get out of the dollar. We're trying to hedge our bets here by moving into alternative assets. We're talking about internationally. You hear about BRICS countries, you hear about Russia, you hear about Turkey. I believe just today, Tanzania announced that they've got a gold buying program in their central banks. So internationally, you hear about central bank, or rather, de-dollarization happening on an international level. And now we're seeing states as well see that holding balance sheets and nothing but dollar denominated assets is a recipe for destruction, a recipe for disaster at a time of high inflation. So even states themselves are trying to move away from all of their assets being priced in dollars and move towards something that has held its value for thousands of years, that being gold and silver.
Yeah, I never thought this would be possible. I always knew there'd be some type of like reset, but to bring back somewhat of a gold standard, that's the last thing I thought, it would be. Like yesterday, Basel III passed where banks have to hold 4.5% of tier one assets like gold. I think that's them trying to combat the BRICS new currency that supposedly they'll be announcing like October 22nd, I think the BRICS summit is. But how similar is this to like the old original gold standard?
Honestly, it's not similar at all. And that's kind of a good thing. What we're doing here is a very bottom up approach. It starts with the grassroots movement, and that eventually percolates up. What we saw in the United States previously was a top down imposed gold standard. And so you have like a price fixing mechanism. You have the ounce of gold that's set at a certain price, and then you have outstanding shares or outstanding notes that are allegedly backed by the amount of gold that's held in safes. But the reality is, and the more I think about this stuff, the more I professionally do this stuff, we don't need Congress to enact a gold standard. We don't need a national currency system, a national currency sort of system that's policed or governed by a central bank or by a government. More than anything, we just need the government to get the hell out of the way. Gold is worth what it's worth, and gold is used and has great monetary powers, not through government edict, not through executive order, not because the government says it does, but because monetarily, through the market, it has proven to be a reliable, sound money. And so you don't need the permission or the imprimatur of a government to label or to designate gold and silver as money. They are money. That's what makes them great,
Right.
regardless of what the United States government or any government says.
How many other people are doing this besides like you were in sound money defense? Honestly, I feel like you guys don't get enough credit. Like this is really like good work, you
I
know?
appreciate that, Slayer. I thank you, man. And the work you're doing here to elevate and what you're doing with the channel here, spreading the word, man. I thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing. Because
Yeah.
man, I go around state to state, and I've said this before. There are more than 8,000 elected state legislators in the United States here, um, and the vast majority of them have never even heard the term sound money. They've never asked themselves questions about money. What is money? Why do we use it?
Mm,
Where does it derive its value? What types of properties do you want a good money to have? What should that look like? And the people that govern us, our politicians have in many cases never even so much as thought to ask themselves these questions. So the education part of this is, almost as important, just as important as far as I'm concerned, as the actual passing of policy, talking to the people, helping people understand and kind of helping them question some of these ideas of like, what do you mean inflation is a given? Why is it a stated policy that our dollar has to lose 2% of its purchasing power every year? Is that what makes a good money? Why is that? And of course, you
mm.
get these economists who will run your regressions, and they'll tell you, of course, you have an expanding population, so you need an inflationary monetary system so that as the population expands, you don't have deflation because we're very worried about deflation. And man, that is just a euphemism. It's a clever sleight of tongue way to say theft because it's just outright stealing,
Mm.
to the zap the purchasing power, the savings, of wage earners, of savers, of retirees, of people here in the United States who are already struggling in many cases to afford food and housing and medicine and transportation. And there's a policy, a literal stated policy of dollar devaluation happening. And so, like, we can go through the technical analysis, we can go through the charts, we can, look at the sort of nerdy economics of it, but there's a morality happening. There's a lack of morality that's happening here in
Right,
in
right.
theft, in weaponizing a monetary unit so as to commit atrocities around the globe militarily or fund atrocities across the globe militarily being done in our name. Many cases, people can't find the places that are being bombed on a map, but millions of dollars are regularly being sent out. And, it's not, that stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. That is how monetary systems die. That is the history of money. There were the greatest empires in the world that had the strongest, most reliable monies. And it wasn't until that they started debasing their currency, clipping
Yep.
their coins, that history happens. And these great economies, these great empires collapse. And that's what we're seeing happen here in real time in the United States. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but this is death by a thousand cuts, and we're seeing it internationally and domestically.
Yep, little by little. I don't know if enough people understand how worthless the dollar truly is. Like when I say the percentage of 98, when I say the dollar's lost 98% of its original purchasing power, that's a factual percentage, not 99, not 97. It's lost 98%, and we are $35 trillion in debt. It's going to go to 99% eventually. Every every single fiat-based system lasts around a century, a little more. I think the dollar's the longest lasting
Mhm.
one. And it's inevitably going to collapse. It's like we're trying to get ourselves out of debt by replacing it with more debt. That's like trying to pay off a credit card with another credit card.
Mhm.
And it's caught up. And that's why you'll see, like in third world countries, they carry their money in trash bags and weigh their money on scales at the cash register because their dollar bills are so inflated as like the purchasing power of like 5 cents. So you have to hand over hundreds of dollars just to buy something, like a banana. And I feel, and that's why you have like the Zimbabwe $1 trillion bill, for
Mhm.
example.
Mhm.
And that's the conclusion of every single fiat-based system, like you were mentioning. And yeah, the only way to fix that is precious metals. But I say that because I never thought that we could get back to that as the solution. I thought there would have to be some type of reset or some digital currency backed by, physical commodities or something along those lines. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I totally get why you would think that. And I think even the people in this space have sort of been thinking that way for a long time. If something has happened, and the majority of the progress I think that we've seen regarding sound money at all has largely or much of it has come from the federal level. You have Ron Paul, and of course none of these bills passed, but you had Ron Paul, or you had champions like Ron Paul in Congress, Thomas Massey in Congress, now Alexander Mooney
Yeah,
from
Robert
West
Mooney.
Virginia. Yeah,
Robert
yeah,
Mooney,
yeah. So,
yeah.
so, and we've worked closely with Representative Mooney's office for years now to introduce some of the bills that you may have heard of. Bills that would, in one case, reestablish a gold standard is a bill that he had. In another case, auditing America's gold. We have this great depository here in the United States, known as the United States Bullion Depository, stored protected by near the Army base at Fort Knox. And we're told that all of America's gold holdings in there, but there hasn't been an audit, a real audit, in more than 50 years. And so even if the gold is there, I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but even if it is there, is it encumbered? Who owns it?
Mm.
Who has the rights to it? Has it been traded or swapped or leased? What kind of encumbrances are placed on that gold? So Representative Mooney, did a great job with that bill and sort of carrying some of these sound money bills. So I think that it makes a lot of sense to look to the federal level for some of these answers. But what we've found working through the state level is that the most effective thing here has been, by removing the disincentives to people using gold and silver as money. What we've also found is that we're helping to remove disincentives to smart people, entrepreneurs, innovating within this space. The government has a monopoly on money and they haven't really let anyone touch it for a really long time. And that's not by accident, of course. The United States
Right.
government wants you using the fiat dollar. They
Right.
don't want you using alternative currencies. And so they've saddled everything else with taxes and with all of these other regulations so as to make them unworkable as money. But what we've found is that by removing some of these places of friction, we've seen innovators in this space and we've seen innovation in this space like we haven't seen in a long time. I'm talking digitized, tokenized gold. We're seeing cryptos come out like that. I'm talking about fractional metals that we've seen that we're seeing. A thousand ounce gold piece is this incredibly small thing that is pretty new to the market. We're seeing things
Actually,
like gold backs. Do you have?
some
Yeah, 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 yeah. So we're seeing
shout
innovators,
out to
smart
this
people.
guy.
Yeah, Jeremy.
This guy
Jeremy's team over
Abram
is.
Taylor sent me some of these. These are called goldbacks, and it's 1/1000th troy ounce of gold in each one of these. And yeah, shout out to him. He sent me those the other day. But yeah,
And so Goldback is, an example of this technology where they've created this new technology that allows actual gold, grains of gold, to be inlaid on this foil that makes it impossible to duplicate or to replicate. So, on top of all of that, on top of the innovation that we're seeing in the space, kind of on the individual item side, I don't know, you may have seen the news earlier this month. Money Metals Exchange announced they opened a $28 million facility, a precious metals depository bigger than Fort Knox. It's the largest precious metals depository in North America. So, like, you're talking about a retail business. You're not talking about taxpayer dollars. You're talking about a retail business that sees a legitimate business case for pouring millions of dollars into the storage of precious metals because that's what's coming. That's the future. People are waking up to this idea that, hey, hang on, there are, people here in the United States are waking up to, wait, I can no longer afford groceries. I can no longer afford basic necessities. This dollar used to go farther. And then around the world, people are looking around and saying, wait a second, that dollar is weaponized. The United States is using that dollar to harm their enemies and to help their friends. And I don't like that. And so they are understandably looking for alternatives and they're
yeah.
looking for a money that can't be manipulated, that can't put it, fingers on scales. And of course, it's God's money. It's honest weights and measures. It's gold and silver. And it always was and it always will be because it has no counterparty risk, because you don't have to worry about politicians politicizing decisions and, trusting them to act in your best interest.
What are the biggest hurdles? I mean, of course, a lot of government doesn't want this to happen. I mean, I feel like you're fighting a giant, right? You're going against the system. Like,
I mean,
what problems have you? Probably
no,
everything under the sun, but
it's no doubt, we're not just talking about Leviathan in general. We're talking about Leviathan's greatest weapon, their greatest power. The government's monopoly on money gives them such awesome and incredible power, foreign and domestically, that no, of course not. By no means will they willingly give up their power to tax, their power to create revenue, their power to deficit spend. But like we were saying earlier, the reality is that the people that govern our lives, either in DC or in state capitals in many cases, these aren't econ PhDs. These aren't people that are well studied in Keynesian economics or in MMT even. These aren't, people with economic backgrounds. So it's not even necessarily that they're hostile towards sound money. They simply don't know.
mm,
And that's been the hardest challenge. We're talking about something a little esoteric, right? That's something Article
it's a good
1,
point.
Section 10 of the Constitution says what? And then legal tender is this concept that no one really understands. What's it all mean? People don't get that, right? And even, for someone that's interested in the topic, I've devoted my life to this topic. And even I hear this sometimes and my eyes glaze over like, whoa, that was boring. And like, if you're wanting to enact change, if you're wanting to work with lawmakers to kind of change some of this stuff, we have to change our messaging. We have to be very direct and clear about our messaging, about how this harms the poorest people among us, about how inflation creates an environment that is extremely risky for wage earners and for lenders, and of course savers and retirees. So like a big part of it has been education. Another part of it is, unsurprisingly, politicians see whole industries as potential cash or potential
Mm,
tax revenue sectors, right? This thing's a cash cow. If it moves, we should tax it. If it doesn't move, we should tax it anyway. And that's sort of the mantra, I think, of the at least modern American politician. Um, and so when they hear, oh, we can collect, an extra 50,000 to 100,000 if we tax the purchase of gold American Eagles or silver bars or silver rounds. They hear that and they see money signs and they're all about that. And
mm.
but that doesn't work either because outside of all of the moral arguments and the very reasonable arguments as to why you shouldn't be taxing money, what we know through studies is that this form of tax collection is inefficient. There are only 5 states in the United States that still charge sales tax on precious metals. Those 5 states are New Jersey, Hawaii, Vermont, New Mexico, um, and Kentucky. If I am in one of those 5 states and I want to buy precious metals, I'll just go online.
Yeah,
I go online, I have it shipped to Idaho, I have it shipped to Texas, and I avoid the tax right
yeah,
there. So people are getting away with avoiding this tax anyway. And lawmakers, they see the number on the page and they, oh, we want that tax money without seeing that, no, if you look at this dynamically, if you look at it a little closer, people aren't paying this tax anyway. They're getting out of it. So stop committing this horrible crime of taxing money and let people, reach out for the lifeboats that they want to reach out for.
yeah. I'm a broker, so I sell precious metals to every state in the country, and I feel really bad when I sell to
Mm-hmm.
people that live in like New Jersey.
But so
There
New
isn't.
Jersey, so New Jersey is
Yeah.
a great example. I'm glad you brought that up. So you may have heard about 2 weeks ago now, the governor of New Jersey signed a bill that we'd been working on for a while that eliminates the sales tax on purchases
Oh
of precious
wow.
metals. So, and like, man, we're talking about New Jersey. This is a
Yeah.
state that's not exactly known for being like a low tax state. New Jersey is one of
That's
their tax
huge.
footprints is one of the highest in the states. And that bill made it through the entire state legislature without a single dissenting vote. Every single New Jersey assembly person voted yes, and every single New Jersey senator voted yes, and then the governor signed it into law unanimously.
That's
The
huge.
politicians in New Jersey are saying, no, 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 we shouldn't be taxing money either because this is wrong. So it's incredible to see, man.
Maybe.
And it's not like a blue state, red state thing. It's people all over are waking up to, gold and silver are real money. This is
Yeah.
ultimately what real money is. And the longer we continue to do this fiat paper money thing, the longer this nightmare continues.
Yeah, especially with like politicians or anyone in government, they want to go with the flow, like for their jobs or reputation. So if the general consensus starts becoming, hey, this is a good thing, I feel like more people would be on board openly. But
You're right. And that hits a super interesting point that over the last 10 years has really sort of started hitting home for me that you're right, man. Politicians are not followers. Or excuse me, politicians are not leaders. They don't want to lead. They want to hear about all the other successful states that have done what they're considering doing. They don't want to put their foot forward. They don't want to take that risk because ultimately politics is a popularity contest and you're always trying to make it to the next election. So, like, yeah, you're totally right. But because of all of these successes we've had over the years, because we've had this traction now on the federal level where in Congress they're introducing these bills, man, lawmakers are starting to reach out to me to say, hey, I've got this idea. I heard about what happened in this state or in that state. How can we bring this to our state?
yeah, it's a domino effect, and I've been starting to see it too. It's
Totally.
crazy. I did want to mention I have a client. He lives in California, and every time he buys, he has to spend at least $2,000 to not get taxed. How is this stuff? How how far do you see this going? Like, do you think every state or most or like how do you see this playing out in the next couple of years, like realistically?
To speak to what you were just talking about, you're right. California is one of what we call threshold states. These are states that have included anti-poor amendments into their statutes, right? This is a regressive, the entire function of that $2,000 limit that you mentioned is a regressive tax on people making the smallest purchases among us. So the people who are dollar cost averaging with a couple silver eagles a week or a couple silver rounds, right? Those are the
Screwed.
people. those are the people that are most harmed by this tax because they aren't making purchases big enough. And, this is a fly in the ointment in New Jersey. Unfortunately, for the bill that we passed in New Jersey earlier this year, there was language like that had to be included. It's $1,000 threshold in New Jersey, but it had to be included because the governor vetoed the same bill earlier this year that didn't include that threshold, and there were some financial or budgetary concerns. And the only way to convince the governor to sign it was to include that $1,000 threshold. But man, it is the most backwards policies among what we're doing here because like we're talking about, it's the people that are making these small purchases that are completely screwed by the state. By states that are doing this, the 5 or 6 states that have enacted these thresholds. As to what the future looks like, I mentioned it earlier, but man, I've never been more bullish than I am right now. I think that we're already here. We've already 45 out of 50 states have already removed this tax. Of the 5 remaining states that still have the tax, 4 of them have active legislation to end the sales tax on precious metals. So I don't think it's, a pie in the sky sort of dream to imagine a United States that isn't charging sales tax on precious metals in the next 5 to 10 years. I don't think that would be surprising at all. I think more and more states are also going to end the capital gains tax. This is becoming more and more popular. And even though there were only 2 states that passed it this year, there were several that introduced bills and it made it through the process. It passed out of committees or it passed out of one of the chambers before getting hit with a deadline. So, I mean, these are popular bills. And the more and more success that we've had here, and the more and more the United States government continues to spend its way into this doom spiral where you're not taking in enough to pay off the interest on the debt you owe. It's a horrible situation globally, financially, and ultimately gold and silver are the answers. That's going to be what takes us out, what pulls us out and extinguishes this debt.
Is there a site or a chart that keeps up to date stats on each of these states and what their laws are? Because like as a broker like myself, it's always like you just said that New Jersey changed that a couple weeks ago or whatever. Like where can I check? Because I know it's hard. We've talked about this with in Miles Franklin brokers meetings. Like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us don't even know like the
Mm-hmm.
top brokers. We're like, where do we get all this information from? So we're always up to date. Is there anywhere like that?
Yeah, so you can go on our website, soundmoneydefense.org. We're regularly posting news and updates, also commentary, opinions on the precious metals market and sound money policy and such analysis. Also, you can look at the Sound Money Index. Every year, we put out an index that rates all 50 states using a number of different criteria to determine the best and the worst the best and the worst sound money environments in the country. I actually, right before
Interesting.
we got on this call, I was finalizing the 2025 index that is actually set to release here before the end of the year. And it ranks all 50 states by, their sales tax policies, their capital gains policies, whether they have established a depository, what types of restrictions they place on their dealers in the state,
Wow.
whether they have stored or held any gold in their pension funds or reserve funds. So it's a very robust scorecard that, yeah, every year we publish that. It'll be out here soon in the next couple of months before the end of the year for sure. And then, of course, like I mentioned, our site is up to date information on this stuff. And like you said, this stuff it happens kind of slowly and then all at once.
Mm.
Most state legislatures only run from January till about May. So for those 5 or 6 months of the year, I am running like a crazy person back and forth between all these states, testifying in hearings and such. So you can also find me on Twitter. I'm also regularly updating hearings and votes and committee hearings and such. But yeah, so I would encourage everyone. Oh, and importantly, I would encourage everyone listening to be an active participant, I think, in your legislature. I think that's something we don't really think about in part because it kind of feels powerless when you think about DC. If you were to call your congressman, An intern might answer the phone. They might take your message. Your message might reach the congressman or might not. I don't know. Who knows? But it kind of gets lost in the shuffle in the big machine that is the U.S. government, Capitol Hill. But in cases of, Lincoln, Nebraska, or Raleigh, North Carolina, Salem, Oregon, Nashville, Tennessee, you actually have a very powerful voice in your state legislature. And what I can say is that in the 10 years we've been doing this, more than any single tool that we have in our toolbox, more than really succinct and powerful arguments, more than someone going up in a suit and tie and testifying before these committees, the most powerful tool that there is for these legislative battles is the grassroots, is from politicians hearing from people in the state saying, hey, this bill is being introduced in your state. I want you to vote yes. It's important to me that you vote yes. We've heard in several states over the last couple of years, in Alabama 2 years ago, we heard on the House floor, one of the lawmakers say, and now next bill is coming up. This has been our most popular bill of the year. We've received more calls on this than any other bill in the year in our session. We're talking about a gold and silver bill, man. These states are considering cannabis laws, they're considering abortion laws, they're considering taxes, they're considering all sorts of things. And the amount of fervor that we were able to
Nice.
generate on gold and silver is ultimately what decides, but is ultimately what determines whether you win these battles or you lose them. So I would encourage anyone listening to this to sign up for our mailing list. We send out email alerts and action alerts that include key contact information for any people, for any upcoming votes or any legislators. That have a say in any upcoming votes or hearings. So I would encourage
Yeah.
everyone, if you're interested, if you want to bring sound money to your state, sign up for our list. Feel free to reach out to me. Just to thank you for being a part of this, because like I mentioned, it's no one person and it's no one group, but sound money is an idea whose time has come again.
It's very interesting that you say that, especially since I have a platform I could, reaching all 50 states, people, I
Hmm.
could just, me informing everyone or going over, like you said, you're about to post the 2025 index. I could make a video going over all the different states so everyone watching could see their state and see what's going on.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's really cool that you're doing that. And yeah, I'll post your links and everywhere. Like people, I recommend you sign up for his newsletter and you can check out the website, soundmoneydefense.org. I will post all that stuff in the description for everyone to check out as well.
I
Yeah,
appreciate that, man. Thank you. And again, like I said, I appreciate what you're doing with your platform. I appreciate the voices you're elevating. You're doing God's work yourself, man. So thank you.
yeah.
I think lastly, man, it's just, you know, the reason we do it. This is important. This can be a super nerdy niche economic thing. But the reality is that it isn't. And actual lives are touched every day. They're second to language. There is no single uh, second to language, money is our single biggest communicative tool that
Mm,
humans use to interact peacefully. And it's so
mm,
important that that money not be manipulated and not be weaponized, so as not to get signals crossed.
yes.
So yeah, sound money is it's an important thing, and I feel good about what we're doing, man. We're making headway, and we're well on our way to bring some of the stuff back.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because this is one of the things I liked about crypto is like Bitcoin is Bitcoin. There's no Bitcoin of China, Bitcoin of USA. It's universal, and
Hmm.
same with precious metals. There's a
Hmm.
lot of similarities between crypto. I mean, obviously, I'm a silver stacker. I got into crypto a little bit, but that is very important that it is universally, spoken.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, because that
Um,
way, you don't have to trust the Biden administration or the
right.
Harris administration or the Trump administration. You don't have to trust Putin or Zelensky. You don't have to trust, uh, whoever. You don't have to trust whatever head of state is in question. You simply have to trust that gold is gold
Mm, wow.
and
Nice.
that silver is silver, of course.
Yeah. Wow. I really enjoyed this conversation. We'll have to have you back on in a couple months and see how much has changed. I'm sure a lot will have changed by then already. Oh, one last thing. Do you see the appreciation of precious metals prices affecting this at all? like let's say silver hits 60, $70 or something, do you think that would affect your process or how fast this happens?
Yeah, yeah, I think I totally do. And I think I'm already seeing ways in which it is affecting the process now. Back in 2017, I was running around with model legislation that said the state shall hold 1% of your state's holdings in physical gold. And I was begging people, hey, please introduce this bill. Please consider this bill. You're going to want to consider this bill. And gold was $1,200 an ounce back then,
Right.
and some states have considered this stuff more and more, but 7 or 8 years later, gold going from $1,200 an ounce to $2,700 an ounce. Frankly, the politicians that refuse to consider these bills because, whatever it is that they say, there's no yield on gold, or
Right.
gold isn't real money, it's just held for tradition. Whatever it is that the brokers say that keeps them from selling gold, um, they should be embarrassed. They should be
Yeah.
ashamed. They've been negligent in their fiduciary duty to the state and to the people of the state because they chose to invest in third world junk bonds or in CDs
Right.
or in mutual funds without owning a single ounce of gold. So it's asinine. It's absolutely backwards. And the politicians that were involved in this, when this was $1,200 an ounce, should be embarrassed for having lost out on, giving their state and securing their state's
Yeah.
future.
Hmm. All right. Well, I keep thinking of more questions while you're talking. This is such an interesting, I guess because I talk about so many things. This is like the one thing that I've never like had a conversation with or someone that was educated, on it like you. So it's just very interesting. I'm probably going to have 100 more questions. Like, man, I should ask him this. Do you actually? There's another one. Do you think whether Kamala wins or Trump wins, do you think that could have any type of effect on this or what, moving forwards?
I think that Obama was an incredible force for driving gun sales. I think similarly, a Harris presidency will probably increase gold sales. It will
Yeah.
cause more people to flock
Yep.
towards the precious metals, towards alternative assets. On top of that, you've mentioned crypto a couple of times this interview. The Harris administration, the Biden administration now, and presumably what the Harris administration intends to do if they were to win, is a complete crucifixion of that entire industry. Very much so. It's very much so that this candidate in Harris's case, uh, it very much wants to protect the monopoly on the dollar, wants to crush any sort of competition that the dollar might find, be that digitally or with gold. So I think that ultimately, whether it's Harris or Trump, um, I am not confident. I do not believe that the government will shrink in either case. I think that the money printer will continue to go burr. This deficit spending will continue, whether it's on this war or that war, whether it's on this inefficient domestic product or that inefficient domestic project. And the wheels will keep turning because that is the nature of the state. The state will continue to grow. It will never willingly concede its growth or its size or its power. So I think that's why it's important to create some of these avenues for release, right? Sound money, what we're doing here, these are pressure valves because ultimately the dollar is going to continue to be inflated away. And if there isn't that infrastructure already built, a lot more people will suffer than have to. So
Mm,
encouraging people to readopt their own gold standard, to make sure that they're stacking, to make sure that they're buying stuff efficiently if they are going to buy. I'm not talking about the high premium stuff. I'm talking about minimizing premiums, all
right.
of that the best practices, and making sure that you're diversified, making sure that it's one thing to believe that the dollar will continue to be inflated away, right? Then this is like a theoretical thing we hear all the time. Inflation's coming. This is a serious risk, and that historically, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So protecting yourself, your family, your loved ones. In the case of states, protecting your state and the people in the state. Man, it couldn't be more important at a time like right now.
Well said. Man, I'm gonna have to have you back on. Seriously, I really enjoyed this combo, and I'm sure we could branch off into a lot of other, areas as well.
No doubt.
But yeah, so yeah, I appreciate you coming on, and I really appreciate all the work you've been doing. This is seriously like some heroes work, fighting an uphill battle, like and I'm impressed though that you guys have been able to be this successful at it already. So.
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, hit me up anytime. I'd love to come back and chat.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure to go check out all of JP's links. I'll post them in the description. This is Silver Slayer. I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace.